I would like to invite Val Muhowski, our vice chair, to do the land acknowledgement.
I'm Val Muhowski, Vice Chair of Northern California for the Senior Caucus. The California Democratic Party Senior Caucus wishes to honor the land we are on and its native people. We want to offer recognition and respect to counter the doctrine of a discovery with the true story of the people who were already here, to support larger truth-telling and reconciliation efforts, and to remind ourselves that colonization is still happening. We acknowledge that the land where we live and work is unceded territory of indigenous peoples since time began. We are surrounded by traditional ancestral territory and current homeland of many indigenous nations.
Thank you, Val. I just got a message from Lieutenant Governor Kounalakis' office saying she's running late. She was going to welcome you all to our caucus. So when she's here, we'll have her be able to take the floor. So I'd like to start off with a few things. July 4th was 2 days ago, and it commemorates the day we declared independence from Great Britain in 1776. We asserted and soon realized our desire to be free of overseas control and exploitation, political, religious, financial, and thus was the U.S. founded in freedom, if initially only for white men. I don't know about you, but I had some ambivalence about the holiday. Our sense of who we are, our very identity as Americans, increasingly feels assaulted and violated. We have become an unusually diverse nation, and all we have to bind us together is a set of ideals and promises that in so many ways we never lived up to. So when tonight's meeting is going to be focused on a topic that was suggested at a listening session earlier this year, and that is increasing income inequality. Tonight's meeting will be focusing on some aspects of inequality and its ramifications. So, poverty is defined by the World Bank, and I'm reading this, as a pronounced deprivation in well-being. It can be defined narrowly or more broadly, depending on how well-being is understood. Poverty is related to, yet distinct from, inequality. Inequality is concerned with the full distribution of well-being. Poverty is focused on the lower end of the distribution only, those who fall below a poverty line. Income inequality is how unevenly income is distributed throughout a population. The less equal the distribution, the higher income inequality. And so for our first speaker tonight, I'd like to invite Angelica Moyes, our treasurer, to introduce her. Thank you, Angelica. Angelica?
Oh yes, sorry, you froze on my screen. I'm happy to introduce this evening Sissy Trin, who is the founder and executive director of Southeast Asian Community Alliance, SECA. Sissy is an innovative and visionary organizer, a social justice advocate. She builds and leads coalitions that build political power and drive policy change. She founded SECA to uplift underserved low-income immigrant communities and specifically address the needs of the Southeast Asian community. Do we have Sissy here?
Yes. Hi, Angelica. You paused for a second, so I wasn't sure if you were still talking or if I should say hi to everyone.
Go for it.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. As Angelica said in her very kind comments, my name is Sissy Trin, and I think the simplest thing we can describe our work is we want to create communities that are livable, affordable, and economically and environmentally sustainable for our most vulnerable residents. And we specifically focus in LA County and Chinatown in particular. And so Angelica was kind of talking to me about a lot of the different topics that you guys have been talking about or are interested in beyond just income inequality, but also homelessness, housing, and just aging and, aging in place. And I think that it's definitely a topic that we think about all the time. I think something that you probably don't realize is, and most people don't who aren't housing experts, is that the vast majority of the residents in Chinatown that we work with are in fact too poor to qualify for affordable housing, which seems kind of counterintuitive. It's like affordable housing should be if you're low income, but how can you be too low income? And that's just kind of the state of how our housing is built in LA and just nationwide. The assumption is that if you fall under what's called 30% of the area median income, and these are terms that are used by HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Department, they basically assume that you're homeless and that you qualify for services. But actually, the vast majority of low-income residents in LA County are just poor, like they're the working poor. So you can have a full-time minimum wage job and actually be too poor to qualify for affordable housing. And it's something that I think about a lot, especially because we have a lot of seniors in Chinatown who are on fixed incomes. They are, on SSI and other types of kind of supplemental income programs. And in fact, these seniors make so little on SSI that they are considered at high risk of homelessness. And it's something that I think we should really think about too, because the fastest growing segment of the homeless population in LA County in the last, I would say maybe 6 or 7 homeless counts has been seniors and first timers. So the vast majority of people aren't people who are drug addicted, who don't have mental health issues. They're just simply poor. And the gap between what they earn, whether they have a job or whether they have some sort of fixed income, and what rents are, is just growing so quickly that they're just ending up on the streets, couch surfing, living in vans. And unfortunately, our homeless services sector and just our system in general is really designed for people who are acutely homeless. So people who've been on the streets for a long time and people who have a lot of mental health and social services needs. But, if you're just working poor and you end up on the streets, like you don't qualify for a lot of these services. You don't need drug addiction services. You just need affordable housing. And so that's kind of what most of the work we do is, how do we get at providing affordable housing for the people who fall in that, what housing advocates call the donut hole, right? You don't qualify for additional affordable housing, but you're also not someone who's homeless. And again, like I said, for a lot of the seniors, they're making 15% area median income. And just to give you a sense, HUD's current definition for what's considered low income in Los Angeles for one person is $66,750, whereas we're talking about seniors who are maybe making $12,000 a year. And so a lot of our advocacy is, how do we increase the supply of affordable housing for people who otherwise would be too poor to qualify? And then how do we protect them to stay in place if they live in housing that is currently affordable but is at threat? So as many of you may know, gentrification is a huge issue all across, especially the large urban centers, but all across the state and across the country. And so there are a lot of low-income neighborhoods where low-income housing is getting converted into luxury condos. Like I've been hearing cases of SRO, single room occupancies in the Tenderloin in San Francisco, getting, that maybe rented for about $400 or $500 a month for people who were, last resort housing getting converted into micro lofts for Google interns and renting for like $3,000 a month. You know, like, how do we protect those units? Because the people who get displaced are going to end up on the streets if we don't, right? And so there's a lot of programs out there, and a lot of opportunities, given we have a huge budget surplus and we have all these federal dollars that are coming for COVID relief, and then with the infrastructure bill. And so a lot of what we've been trying to push for is using some of that money to acquire some of these buildings that are at risk of conversion as a homelessness prevention strategy. And then, of course, increasing the supply of new affordable housing at the deepest levels of affordability. So you need both strategies, right? You need to get people off the streets, but you also need to get them, prevent them from falling into the streets in the first place. You know, LA county and city have passed several bond measures to provide affordable housing for homeless folks, but we're not building as fast as people are falling into homelessness. And so I think for, you know, one of the things that Angelica had asked me to talk about was really to think about, you know, ways in which this committee can be active in helping to address these issues, right, of housing affordability and homelessness. And I think a large part of it is really pushing around the issue of homelessness prevention, right? You know, and I want to be clear too, a lot of the homelessness strategies, the social services, are also designed towards people who need job training or, you know, job counseling and stuff. But a lot of the seniors in Chinatown and a lot of the folks that we're seeing on the streets, they can't work, right? They can't hold a full-time job. They're too old, they're physically incapable. So we can't assume that more job training is going to solve our problem, you know? And so I think pushing for innovative strategies to keep people in their homes, I think more funding towards that donut hole population, I think those are probably the best strategies that we can think of right now to be addressing this issue. So I think that's my time, unless people have questions or comments.
Well, if you can, please state, I'm going to have the other panelists have their 10 minutes, and then at the end, we'll take questions, okay? Is that okay with you?
Yeah, of course.
Great, thank you, good. Thanks a lot. That's a lot of information you gave us. And now Dr. Bill Honigman, our Vice Chair, will introduce our next speaker.
Well, thank you, Ruth, and that was terrific, Sissy. Thank you so much. I learned an awful lot there. I've been asked to introduce my great friend, Susie Shannon, who I think probably needs no introduction because everybody here should know she's such a good friend of our caucus and of the California Democratic Party for all of her tremendous activism. But I want you to know and appreciate that she is herself a force of nature for good in Southern California as well, and she's has served, as you see here on the screen, on the health commissions for the city of Los Angeles. She's also the executive director of the nonprofit group Poverty Matters, and you know, once again is just a real dynamic force on the issue of poverty and income inequality. And so let me just turn the floor over to Susie. Susie, thanks so much for being with us today.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Bill. I'm also the founder of the DNC Poverty Council, and I work as the policy director for Housing as a Human Right. And I'm only saying that because I got involved in the Democratic Party specifically to help people who are low income and who were relatively voiceless in our party. And why that's so important, and I say this a lot, is that low-income tenants and people who are unhoused don't have a union. They have the Democratic Party. And when the Democratic Party fails them, or elected officials who are Democrats fail them, everyone suffers. And we've seen this obviously with healthcare, we see this with food insecurity, but we also see this with housing. So a little bit about myself. I'm also formerly unhoused. My family was homeless when I was younger for a time, a little while. basically living in motels. And in 2005, I started an organization called Poverty Matters to help people in the Skid Row area of Los Angeles. I actually work nationally now and also throughout California. But I started in a very small area, which is the highest concentration of poverty in LA. And, you know, I have been working on this for a very long time. And I can tell you on Skid Row what I see. I see children rolling backpacks behind them. I see rats that come out at night that run over people, rats in the gutter, garbage in the gutter, and people who once again are being criminalized basically for being poor. And that means that they're getting moved around, some who don't want to be. And we are once again saying that to sit, lie, or sleep on the sidewalk is illegal. And so a lot of us are pushing back against that because we know that a lot of money is spent in enforcement and basically hurting people who are unhoused and potentially giving them arrest records when we should be putting that money into permanent housing. So I work for an organization called Housing is Human Right, and we actually buy SROs to save them. There are over tens of thousands of units that have been lost just in LA. And why do we focus on LA? Because it's the homeless capital of the United States per capita. We share that back and forth with the city of New York. So we actually own SRO buildings, and we have over 1,400 units right now. And we are now trying to save more. One of the SROs that's set for destruction right now is the Morrison Hotel. And this was a developer who basically kicked out tenants and displaced them, and then kept the SRO building vacant for decades, and now wants to make it a luxury hotel, and has never built the replacement housing that they said that they were going to build to fill in those 111 units that they took away. At the same time, we have over 41,000 people who are homeless in the city and over 66,000 in our county. And how are we addressing that? We're creating a lot of temporary housing, not a lot of permanent affordable housing. And so that's creating a housing crisis. And we also are not saving our affordable housing now and our rent-controlled housing. We're losing a lot of that to the Ellis Act, where our rent-controlled housing is getting turned into condominiums. At the same time, we're building housing. We overbuilt, and I'm going to say overbuilt according to our regional housing needs assessment, 70,000 units of market rate housing, while we underbuilt 34,000 units of affordable housing. So just think about that. In the homeless capital of the United States, we have overbuilt market rate housing that most people can't afford, and we have underbuilt affordable housing. So is that market rate housing that seniors on a fixed income can afford? No. No. If they are relying on public assistance, no. If they are relying on our, ever shrinking, money that comes from retirement, no. And so we are seeing that there is a rise in homelessness among our senior population, among families, among children. Veterans homelessness has stayed a little stable, but for the most part, we are losing. And when I say we, I mean those of us who either are low income or who care about low income communities, and who's profiting are corporate developers, and a lot of folks who support a lot of the market rate housing that's going up. So we need to turn this around. Many of you know, because I've come to you, my organization supported and promoted Propositions 10 and 21, which is rent control. We will be going to the ballot again, would be my guess, in the next couple of years. And some of the things that we can all do to sort of advocate for housing is to save our SRO housing. There are lots and lots of buildings that are empty. In fact, over 70,000 units. There are over 70,000 vacant units in the city of Los Angeles right now, with 41,000 people who are unhoused. We could house every single person in the city of LA just with our vacant units. So we really need to focus on these empty buildings. We have homeless encampments living in the shadows of these vacant buildings. That to me is absolutely unconscionable and something we really, really need to talk about. We can take these vacant buildings, some of them need to be rehabbed, and put money into rehabbing them. That costs about $120,000 a unit. Right now, to build new homeless housing, it's costing us upwards of $876,000. The average being $500,000 to $700,000 a unit. We literally could buy a condo for someone and give them a couple $100,000 in spending cash for what we are spending to build from the ground up for homeless housing. That's not to say that we shouldn't build it, just to say that we also need to prioritize taking these vacant buildings, rehabbing those units for approximately $120,000 each. Those can be rehabbed within 6 months, and we can bring people in off the streets. We had 1,500 people die on the streets last year in Los Angeles. That is absolutely unconscionable. It's a tragedy. And right now, they just go encampment by encampment. It's no longer where they're necessarily prioritizing people who are the sickest on the street. They're going from encampment to encampment, asking people they want housing, when the housing is really interim. But there are people who are very sick who have been waiting for years and years and years. A lot of them are senior citizens, interestingly enough, and they're not actually getting the housing that they need, because now it's being looked at geographically. So we can also, if we're building from the ground up, lower that cost per unit by building with prefab modular housing. And this is like, a lot of you will remember, I just remember seeing ads for this, but like the manufactured homes at Sears, where people would go and just buy these sort of prefab homes. They also do this with multifamily units. It's a lot less expensive. My organization will be building 221 units in Skid Row. That cost will be under $300,000 a unit. They won't be 500 to 700,000. We can guarantee that. And then the other thing we need to do is really work on ending this ban on rent control, which in the 1990s, a lot of these laws passed all throughout the country. I have visited several of these states and am working with coalitions in several of these states right now to lift this ban on rent control. We have it here through something called Costa-Hawkins. So it grandfathered in some rent control laws. So you still have some rent control buildings. You know, in LA, it's any building built in 1978 and before. In San Francisco, it's 1979 and before. So if you live in an older building, you would be in a rent control building. But you know, the problem is that newer construction does not include rent control, and anything that's newer than 1978, 1979, different places in different areas. There are some local, like Pasadena right now has a rent control initiative to lower rents for a lot of folks who are under rent control, which is great. We're supporting that as the Renters Council, which I'm also part of. San Francisco has put on a vacancy tax. And this is so that we can stop a lot of these vacant units. Obviously, you know, if you're getting buying buildings for investments, it actually behooves you to some extent to leave the property vacant, right? Because your property will still continue to appreciate. But, you know, and even though you don't have the rental income, if you are planning to sell that building, it's actually likely to sell for more if you don't have tenants leased in place that the new owner needs to deal with. So we have seen this in LA, we've seen this in San Francisco, we've seen this, you know, pretty much everywhere and across the United States. And so, I always say, this is like a David and Goliath story, because when we put up Proposition 21 for rent control, basically to say that local communities would be able to enact or expand rent control, the developers and real estate industry put $100 million up against that initiative to make sure that it failed. And most of the commercials that they put up basically said that it's not good for tenants. And obviously, when you're overspent, when you're outspent 3-1, it's very hard to win a lot of these campaigns. But we're going to go for it again. So,
Susie, you have so much information and people are writing this down, and so I am asking you to hold a lot of what you're saying until we go to the questions. Okay, is that okay with you?
Yeah, I'll pause there. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And I've been told that Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis is here, and I'd like to welcome her and thank her for being here. So, Lieutenant Governor, you have the floor. Or the monitor.
Thank you so much, Ruth. And let me just say, I was really enjoying listening to Susie. She's obviously incredibly well informed on the challenges that we have in this state on housing and homelessness. And thank you very much, Susie, for the work that you do and for bringing the facts and figures and the realities of our housing shortage and our homeless crisis. It is a human rights crisis. It's playing itself out on the streets all around us every day. And it's really, really a difficult problem that's generations in the making. So thank you for that. And I really, Ruth, I just really wanted to come and say hi to everyone. I'm on the ballot and I'm very honored to have been endorsed by the party at the convention. But I'll be down at EBoard, and I saw that you guys were having your caucus today. So I thought I would just log on and say thank you for those who supported me, for the party in general, for my endorsement. It really means the world to me. And also thank you for everything that you do in your activism and your organizing for the party. It is just more important than ever. Everywhere you go, you hear people saying, oh, I don't know, can the Democrats really hold the House? That's not what we do. That's not what the organizers do. We know that this is an ongoing marathon of activism and organizing that keeps our party strong. And so other people may come and go from activism and support and fundraising and even voting, but our party, organizers show up even when it's hard. And that's why in California, for every Republican registered voter, we have 2 Democrats registered to vote in our state. And we have to keep it that way, because the stakes are very high. And as we saw with this horrific judgment from the Supreme Court, they are coming after women, they are coming after the LGBTQ community. And even though, of course, abortion and access to reproductive care are legal in California, we have to assume that they're going to be coming after us here in California as well. So some of the things that I have been working on in the 4 years since I was elected lieutenant governor, George, remember those early salad days? I know you remember, but it's been, hi, Susan, just jumped on. It's been really a very rewarding and exciting and just really interesting 4 years for me serving. Generally speaking, I'm organizing my work in the Lieutenant Governor's office around 4 different areas. Public higher education, because I sit on the boards of the UC, the CSU, and the community college. Spent a lot of time on that, making it more accessible and more affordable for our students and fighting tuition increases. Secondly, on the environmental side, I'm on the State Lands Commission. Spent a lot of time working to combat offshore drilling and, in fact, invest in wind energy off our coasts, which is a really exciting new space that California is moving forward into. And third, the governor asked me to represent California as a former U.S. ambassador on the world stage. I led the delegation to Glasgow for the climate summit there, but I spent a lot of time day in, day out. In fact, had Volodymyr Zelensky in California in September because we have a state partnership program with Ukraine. But it's really been great work and something I know I can contribute. And then finally, on the equity side, is the first woman ever elected lieutenant governor of California. Gives me a special platform to talk about the importance of representation, of making sure that all voices are heard, certainly including the voices of our seniors. You all, I'm getting there, but you know, we've lived many lives, seen all kinds of things. We know viscerally how important American democracy is, how important our rights are, how important it is to fight for those rights every generation. And it's been a real privilege to be able to be part of that fight, including co-sponsoring the legislation that is put on the ballot, Proposition 1, that will enshrine in our Constitution a woman's and any person's right to access abortions and contraception. So that's a little bit about what I'm doing. But again, mostly I really just wanted to come here and say thank you. Susan Pfeiffer, I say thank you to you all the time as a fellow San Franciscan, watching you organize, and Ruth, to you as chair, and all of you. I will let you get back to the really informative presentation and Q&A I know you're going to go into on housing. It's a huge challenge. Maybe just one shout out for Project Room Key and Project Home Key. Big federal dollars and state dollars going in to doing exactly what you were hearing about, which is buying and refurbishing motels, hotels, apartments, anything that we can in order to keep the price or the cost down and deliver more quality housing with wraparound services to people in need. So I'm going to sign off, Ruth. Thank you again for letting me pop in. And if any of you are going to be down there on the weekend, I'll look forward to seeing you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for coming, and I will see you down there. I'll be
Great.
driving down tomorrow. So
All right,
thank you.
safe travels. Thank you.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, and getting back to our discussion, I'd like to introduce our Vice Chair, Dottie Smith, who has a wonderful story to tell you, and we've titled it Rising Out of Poverty. So Dottie, would you please take the floor?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Dottie.
Hello, Ruth, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I enjoyed the presentation, so thank you. First of all, I'd like to say, as Ruth introduced me, I am Dorothy Dottie Smith, a lifelong resident of Fresno, California. And been here all my life, and I'm still here. And as you all know, Fresno is the center of the Golden State of California, so I'm proud to be a Fresno. Well, I'd like to say, in terms of me stepping up, stepping out, and stepping on from poverty, it was a journey. And I'm not going to say it was a bad journey. It was a journey. And I think that the upbringing I had helped me to deal with it more. And the definition, I think you all know, of poverty is being extremely poor. My family was indeed extremely poor. I did not have running water or bathroom in my home until I was a freshman in high school. So I do know, if some of you do not know what an outhouse is, I do. And if some of you don't know what it is to bring a pail of water into the house, I do. But those things, they didn't break me. They helped to make me who I am. And one of the things I like to say, growing up in poverty, when I talk about not having, well, first of all, before we built onto our house, we only had 2 rooms. And in those 2 rooms, one room was the kitchen, and that's where the 3 girls, my sister, myself and my 2 sisters slept in a rollaway bed in the kitchen. And my brothers slept on a couch that we had in the other room with my parents' bed. So, and I know that even is what is funny, and I don't want to take too long to belabor this, is that the fact that I really didn't know just how poor I was. My mother would always say to us, "You can be poor, but you don't have to be poor class." She was an avid reader. She would spend her last money to make sure that we had encyclopedias, that we had the latest children books. We always had the daily newspaper, and and I think that's why I'm an avid reader, because it was important to her. And growing up in poverty in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, she always wanted her children to make sure that we understand the importance of education so we could break the chain of poverty. And so she used to brag and say, she was proud of all 6 of her children, because we did those things pretty much that she and my father trained us to do. And I know I've heard Bill Cosby say, if you see good kids, you need to congratulate the parents. And I would say, my parents definitely need to be congratulated, because they refuse to let us not understand how important education was. And another thing that I remember growing up, that if you fall down in the mud, don't waddle in it. Get up and clean yourself, brush yourself off, and keep on going. And poverty, as I look at it now, it's not a real ugly word, but it's just a state of being extremely poor. And I did not know how poor I was until I enrolled in college, and I found out my family was below the poverty level. So what is that? We didn't have running water or a bathroom, but we had a roof over our head, and we always had a decent meal. And one thing that my mother made sure of, even though she was a domestic and my father worked in the fields or whatever he could find, we always sat down at the table as a family, 6 kids and my mother and father. And I think I was also blessed because I did have both a mother and a father in the home, although we didn't have some of the things. And I was embarrassed as a girl to invite my friends over because we did not have bathroom or running water in the house. But just somehow or another, I got through that. And because my mother, as I said earlier, was an avid reader, I understood the importance of reading, and I loved school. And so, and as a girl, one of my friends said this, and I may have shared with some of the people in the senior caucus. One of my childhood friends told one of my former students, when she found out that she was one of my students, she said, when we were kids and we played church, Dottie was a preacher, and we played school, Dottie was a teacher. And what I said to my former student who was telling me about that, I said, don't they both save lives? The teacher and the preacher. So I'm happy to be, described as that. But stepping out of poverty, I just knew, the stepping out of poverty, the main thing that I had to do was get a good education. And I worked in the fields, picked grapes, top cotton, pick cotton, et cetera, et cetera. And my mother and father used to always say, now you don't want to do this forever, so you better get a good education. And I think that was one of the reasons, well, that was a main reason why I wanted an education. I definitely did not want to cut any grapes when the fields was sun up to sundown. But I think getting a good education has definitely helped me. It helped me to I haven't always been happy with the situations in education, because as an African American woman, I have not always been treated justly or fairly. And when I when as a child, it really hurts when you know that you should have been in a certain place and you weren't there because you weren't white, and they give it to a white student. I mean, that's terrible, and I'm talking about it now because when I think about it, it still hurts. So being Black in America, it still has its disadvantages. And as a girl, can you imagine who couldn't do or say anything or take care of herself? When these types of things happen, it was really a burden. But what I did, I was a radical. So as a radical, I led walkouts. protests, during my high school years, because after I saw the injustices and things that were happening, I felt I had to do something about it. And one of my a person was telling me some years after my high school, said, Dottie was a mean little cuss, and she was always starting trouble. I said, well, I take that as a compliment, because I didn't even know the term good trouble, but I guess it was good trouble when I had students who were marching out of class and doing those things that they thought would help to make their education and their livelihoods better. But stepping out of poverty still goes back to this: education is important. It is important. And if you don't have an education in our society, you just lost. And it bothers me. I retired from education after 37 years, having been a teacher, counselor, principal, program manager. It hurts my heart when I see, especially kids of color, not taking advantage of the opportunities they have with an education. Because I used to always say, you could be on the road to rail to jail, or you could be on the road to success. That's what I used to tell my students. So you need to get a good education. And for me, I think that is what changed my life completely. And also the fact that even though we were poor, my mother always taught us that you have to help people. I grew up volunteering in my community, helping the senior citizens. Even when I got my license, taking some of the seniors or sick people with cancer, taking them to for their treatments. So it's a lot of things that help you to be the person you are. And stepping out of poverty is not just saying, I got a good job, I have a good education. Stepping out of poverty is to remember where you came from. And I'm thinking in terms of where you came from. If you're not able to bring somebody else up with you, or more people up with you, you're not a success in my book. It's not about I'm this and I'm that. It's about what have I done to help others? What have I done to be a role model for students, or whatever, or for the people in my community? And I love it when I go back to my community, some of the seniors who are still there, and even some of the girls and boys I grew up with, when they say, Dottie, you haven't changed. So I'm saying, change from what? Just because I was able to get an education, just because I was able to do some things, run for office and elected to the community college board, and also served on our California community college board and our national community college board. And, people would sometimes say, Dottie, you're lucky. My mom told me, Dottie, you're not lucky. You worked hard for what you got. So if any young people are listening to this, when people tell you you're lucky because you've done something, if you work your behind out to do it, you went to school, you studied, and you worked for it, just shine them on. Because and as Tina Turner would say, what luck got to do with it? It's still hard work. and sometimes getting those positions or doing what you need to do to make your life better, it comes sometimes come disguised as hard work. And so I never really thought that I had to have my hand out. But even at poverty, like I said, I didn't know I was below the poverty level till I got to college. But I've always had the need to try to help. I was, even as a girl, I go over to the seniors' house and help them, do things, help them prepare their food. And some of the ladies that help comb their hairs and do these types of things. And I feel blessed. And I'm thinking, as an old person now, a senior, that I think that I've done some of the things that I was put on this earth to do. And that's to be a good person, and to make sure that I've done all that I could to help to make my world and the people around me better. And by doing that, I think I have been made to be better. And I hope that I haven't taken up too much time. I already told Angelica, if I go on too long, stop me. I see Ralph clapping his hands, so I think, okay, here I go. But anyway, I do appreciate the fact that you have allowed me to speak to you. And as I said, stepping up, stepping out, and stepping on, we have the capacity. And I don't think, well, being poor is, believe me, it's not a good thing, but you can't overcome it. And I was blessed, as I said, I had two parents, my mother and my father, and they encouraged education. And I think what we need to help young people overcome, even though you have good teachers, it does take a community to raise kids. And I was blessed to be brought up
Dottie,
in one of
Dottie,
my time. Okay, thank you,
Yes.
bye.
Yeah. Dottie, thank you so much. Yes, yes, yes.
Well, I hope, I'm sorry. I
You
told you
failed
to
to
look at the,
dot.
So we've had um, three panelists talking about their perceptions of what's going on with income inequality and poverty and what can be done about it. And now I'd like to open the floor for questions. And if you have a question, please raise your digital hand. If you go to the bottom of your screen under reactions, the big button is raise hand. So if you have any questions for Sissy or Susan or Dottie, please raise your hand. Howard, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, yes, Madam Chair. Question I have is this. I'd like to know if there are different degrees of being a senior in terms of housing, because I bought my house in 1977 before Prop 13, so I don't pay anything. And I own it because I lived in over 30 years. But not everybody is as lucky as I am. So I was just wondering if you could comment about income inequality about people like me, the Prop 13 generation.
Do you want to ask of which of our panelists?
To everybody,
Okay,
if everybody could
so
comment.
Sissy or Susan or Dottie, who'd like to respond?
I can actually respond.
Okay,
okay.
So thank you for that question. I think that Prop 13 has created a lot of income inequality in our state. And I'm less concerned about individuals and more concerned about corporations and the super wealthy and how they benefit from Prop 13. Like the fact that, I own like a modest condo in Pasadena, California, and I pay more in property taxes than Warren Buffett, who is like the fourth richest man in the world. Simply because he bought his mansion, coastal mansion back many, many decades ago. But more importantly, corporations that are able to skirt Prop 13 assessments, basically because how they structure sales, they don't sell the building, they create an LLC to sell the building, so the LLC only exists specifically to facilitate the sale of real estate. And so they don't get a property assessment. And so you have corporations like Citibank that own entire buildings in downtown Los Angeles that pay like maybe a couple $1 million in property taxes a year for what should be assessed at like tens of millions of dollars. So yes, as a property owner, I'm also a beneficiary, but I think the issue is more about corporations and how they benefit from these tax systems, as opposed to individuals who, maybe are middle income and, did well, but I don't think that like your benefits are nearly to the same extent. And so I think that we do need to rethink that. And there was a ballot measure, unfortunately, that failed that would have reassessed corporate property taxes.
Yeah, Sissy, I'd like to add to that. Thank you. I think those are important points you made. One of the things I think that happens as a result of Prop 13 is that many seniors are left with homes that are too big for them. But because they can't afford something else because of the rise in properties, there's in many ways they're stuck. And I think we need to come up with some creative ways of supporting seniors who are in that situation by, I know that there are ways of doing it. I can't articulate them right now, but being with
Grandfathering.
say that, Ralph?
I was saying grandfathering some of those provisions.
Right. So I think that's another part of the puzzle that needs to be looked at. Uh, Carol Taylor, you're
Yeah,
on
my
mute.
internet is terrible. I'm sorry if I'll be breaking up. I had two questions. First, if you guys would put your contact information in the chat and your organization's names, that would be so really great. Yeah, what you're saying is really exciting. About using these current COVID and infrastructure dollars, how is that successful? Is there any way as the public we can help promote that? Anybody we can support that with?
Yeah, I would like to answer that, if that's okay. So the COVID dollars have been extremely important. One is that through a rental assistance program, and my organization started a campaign to give $5 billion in rental assistance to tenants who had fallen behind on rent just to keep them housed. And at the time, we were told that's crazy. You're never getting 5 billion. You might get 2 billion. You might get 2.5 billion. We ended up getting $5.2 billion. And that came in from the federal government for COVID dollars for rental assistance. Now, the state has not been great in putting out the money, unfortunately, and there's still a lot that needs to be distributed. But that did help many, many people. I mean, the UCLA had done a report that showed that about 400,000 people were set to lose their apartments if, their rental units, if we didn't have any kind of assistance. So that was really helpful. What the Lieutenant Governor spoke about, which is Project Room Key and Home Key, also was very helpful. It was helpful, particularly for our unhoused community in terms of moving folks indoors where they have a roof over their head and a door that they can lock and some privacy. My worry, of course, because I'm always worried about what's coming, 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, is that when that money dries up, what happens to these motels? We've already seen the end of the rental assistance program. So then what's going to happen to people who continue not to be able to pay their rent? So there's a lot of, for me, there's a little bit of anxiety for the future, but as of right now, I think it's really saved people from getting evicted. It has saved folks. There are still some people who have gotten evicted. We do know that, but for the most part, it's kept people in their housing, and it has really helped our unhoused population in terms of moving indoors.
Yeah, I can add to that, Susie. Thank you for that. In where I live, Project Home Key took possession of a nursing home that had been vacant for several years. And I can tell you that the outcry of the people, some people in that neighborhood was ludicrous. It's the usual, not in my backyard type of thinking, because it was going to be designated for the unhoused with supportive services. And so it's challenging, even when the money is there, to get the community to be supportive of the advocacy for it. So yeah, that is important. Thanks. Cynthia, question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, and maybe this is outside the scope, and if it is, I'll ask something different, but I wonder what everyone thinks of Governor Newsom's plan for care courts.
I think that is something we're not going to touch on
Okay.
today.
Okay, then can I ask, wouldn't it help if the federal government more fully funded Section 8? I'm just curious.
Yes.
Yes. So obviously, part of the plan, part of Biden's plan was to greatly increase Section 8 vouchers. And of course, that plan never made it to fruition because of one or two Democrats who are Democrats in name only would not support it. But Maxine Waters has an incredible piece of legislation. We are trying to get more Congress members to sign on to it, particularly in California. I was just in Washington, D.C. A couple of weeks ago. We did a congressional, similar to a congressional hearing, but it was a congressional briefing on her bill. And what this does is increase Section 8 vouchers. It makes housing really a human right. And it basically it's called the Ending Homelessness Act. I think it's now 2022. It was 2021. So if we can get that passed, and always pushing to get something passed before the November election, because you never know what's going to happen and Democrats could lose control. But if we can get that passed, we can get the increase in Section 8 vouchers. And this would be, there's a lot of talk about having vouchers for everyone who qualifies. That would be really helpful. It's not, vouchers are not the total solution, because for everyone who has a voucher, they need to find a landlord who will take it. And if they're unhoused, it's very hard to find a landlord who will take it, because a landlord would rather take somebody who's already housed or losing their housing than somebody who is unhoused. So there are some complications, but we do need to increase those vouchers, because particularly the homeless set-aside vouchers have been a lifesaver for a lot of my clients, who we have moved directly from the streets into housing without shelter or transitional housing. And so the more vouchers we have, the more that we can do that and get people stable sooner.
Thank you. Thank you. Sissy, did I see you trying to say something?
No.
Okay. Sorry. Dottie.
Yes, I just wanted to add to some of the things that have been said. In terms of our political leaders, I think they need to be more in tune to the needs, the true needs of their constituents. And I say this, having been a migrant summer school principal, I made it a point that all of my teachers had to visit the homes of the migrants that we served. And when you go to the homes and you see they actually have dirt floors, when you see the conditions and what they live, it changed your mind and make you think that maybe I need to do more. And I really maybe what I'm saying is not the thing to say or do, but I really do think that the politicians need to be more in tune to the people they serve. And when I have gone to some of those migrants' homes, they have said, no one has ever come to our home. No one has ever shown that they care. And when you do those types of things, I'm just going to my migrant family's homes. I was invited to dinner almost every night, you know what I'm saying? Because it really makes a difference. And that's what I'm advocating, that our political leaders make sure that they understand and know the people who they propose to serve. And another thing that I want to say, there are people, in poverty, as I talked about growing up in poverty, but we also need to think in terms of the middle class. And I started a scholarship called In the Middle, because middle class folks, we aren't able in some instances to get those things that we need. We're too poor, but we make too much to have a decent life. So we need to just think about those people that are caught in the middle, as well as when we're talking about those in poverty.
Thanks, Dottie. Ralph. Ralph? You had your hand up. Yeah, hi.
I was muted. I think this is a question for Susie, talking about the potential for available dollars. A lot of the rents that were defrayed during the early COVID period, a lot of those I understand are coming due soon. A lot of those are in lump payment demands. A lot of people in other cities like New York are being evicted because they don't have the money to pay those coming due rents that they were deferring. Is this something, first of all, it would seem like a big number. And second is there a program within the state or federal that is designed to cover, especially for seniors and especially for, those in need, some of those, rents as assistance?
Yeah. So for people who applied for the rental assistance program before it ended, they should, unless there was something wrong with the application and for some reason it was, sort of taken out of priority, they should be getting money. However, the way that the state has managed the program is a complete disaster. And so in many parts of the state, the eviction moratorium has been removed. So landlords can now demand this money or evict the tenants, and they're still waiting for the money to come from the state that they were promised. So this is a huge problem in this in the state. It's not in in the city of LA. We still have our eviction moratorium intact because we passed something, before, the bill passed, that said that the eviction moratorium would be in place up to a year after our emergency orders are taken away on COVID, and we still have not taken them away. So other than LA, and I think San Francisco just passed something recently to protect tenants, we're very concerned that people will get evicted just because they, owe this money. And, I worry particularly about seniors because there still is a digital divide, and I worry about people in rural communities too, because there still is a digital divide. Most of the applications that were filled out were online or at service centers, which are concentrated in large cities. So our seniors who have a digital divide or may not have heard about it or may not be connected to a resource center were very vulnerable from the beginning. May not have heard about it, may not have known, how to apply. So that was a huge problem. And there's also a language barrier. I was helping a lot of people who were only Spanish speaking sign up for the program because they just didn't understand what they needed to do or how to get through the whole thing. And we ended up, even with my help, we still ended up having to call in a number of cases because at some point we would be stopped. So there were a lot of barriers. We have like rapid rehousing dollars that people can use if they didn't sign up for the rental assistance. In some cases, people didn't sign up, but their landlord did, which was interesting. So there may still be like a way to get the rental assistance if the landlord filed for it. But it's a complete disaster. And to basically release that eviction moratorium before all of the money had been given out, I think was kind of cruel because you left people, you gave people a lot of hope and they're still going to get evicted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tim, a question, please, if you have one.
Can you hear me?
Yes?
Hi, thank you, Susie. I really want to thank you. I mean, you're such a resource and things that I don't know. I'd love to learn more from it. I placed just a couple of phrases in the chat and I won't speak to them, but I think there are things I would like to discuss with people that are knowledgeable like Susie, and wondering if it might be possible to arrange some type of a several-hour workshop some morning as seniors to look at that. But I wanted to mention an experience I had on an airplane and ask about the idea of profit, that scarcity creates profit. And I sat next to a guy from Gucci one time. He said they had 250,000 boots that they destroyed every year. And I asked, I said, well, why couldn't you give those to people in need? He said, well, if we did that, the price would drop. And so the housing prices in San Diego are insane. And I put a couple of articles related to that in the chat also, if you're interested. But one of the biggest problems is it's too expensive to buy houses in San Diego. And all these other things seem to me going around the edges of it, and they take a long time to implement. So, the things sometimes are the way they are because someone wants it the way they are. And that would be my comment and my question.
Thank you, Tim. Any of the panelists like to respond? And I know that you put some things in the chat, so thanks for doing that. Susie and Sissy and Dottie, if you can put your contact information in the chat, Tim would like to contact you. So we'll see what we can do about that.
Will
Yeah,
do.
okay. Okay.
So it's absolutely true that scarcity creates profit. But the real scarcity is for affordable housing. And housing can be a little different because corporate landlords, corporate developers can hold on to property like we're seeing here in LA for 20 years and it won't matter to them because it's just a line on their balance sheet and it's property that's appreciating. And so if you have owners or developers that don't have to lease up, if you have people who are not creating enough affordable housing, what you see is what we have now, and also no rent control to protect anyone from these price increases. You get what you have now, which is that we have increasing homelessness. We have over 50% of our population paying over 30% of their income in rent, and over 30% of our population spending over 50% of their income in rent. And so they are rent burdened. Many people are just a couple of rent increases away from losing, from having to move out of their city or their neighborhood altogether, even making what they make today, because a lot of wages are stagnant. So, this is just, it's going to be a domino effect, and we're going to see increasing homelessness everywhere. Our homeless numbers will come out in LA soon. There'll be an increase in homelessness. We know, we don't know what percentage. I'm getting a little bit of feedback coming in for different areas. But if we do not create affordable housing, if we don't mandate from our legislators who passed SB 9 and SB 10 with no requirement for affordable housing, that we have a mandate for affordable housing, inclusionary zoning, things are going to get worse. And I feel like seniors, children, people who can't work for whatever reason, or where there are not enough jobs available, are really going to suffer.
Thank you, Susie. I see that two more people have questions. Unfortunately, we're out of time for this part of the segment. Susan and Sophia, if you could put your questions in the chat, we'll see if we can get them answered for you afterwards, okay? Thank you. So, thank you, Susie. Thank you, Sissy. Sissy, do you have any last words you'd like to share with us?
Sure. I think, we've shared a lot of information, a lot of statistics, and I don't want you guys to walk away feeling like these issues are intractable or impossible, right? Because otherwise, why are you guys active in the Democratic Party? You are trying to make change. And I think a lot of it is really about changing political will and not about the technical pieces. There's lots of technical folks, right? There's Susie, there's me, there's Dottie. Like, when there's technical questions, you lean on the experts, right? But you guys are really there to help provide us with the political support to get the funding, to get the programs into the streets, right? And to really push the Democratic Party, because the reality is that it's cheaper to house people who are homeless than to keep them homeless, right? It's not a budget issue. We're also the 5th largest economy in the world, right? If Germany can figure out how to solve these issues and Japan can, we certainly can as California, right? But it's about political will. And so I think you guys being active in the party and pushing, the lieutenant governor, the governor, your local elected officials to really build more affordable housing, build more supportive housing, support our neighbors who are tenuously housed, folks who are low income. That's, I think, the best thing that you can do to make use of your skills and assets and resources.
That is right on. Thank you, Susie. That is so important what you just said. Political will is, I think, part of the problem too. So we do have a lot of work. I agree with you. Thank you so much. Dottie, any last words? Quick.
I'm sorry I was muted, Ruth. No, I'm good. I have enjoyed this session, this part of the session. So thank you so much. I have no last words.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, all of you. It's been enlightening for many of us, and we will continue on with our fight because income inequality is getting worse, not better, and poverty is increasing, as is homelessness. So we have lots of issues to deal with, and I can tell you that the Senior Caucus will be pushing for these. I can tell you that here where I live, of the unhoused population, 1 out of 3 are seniors and women. think about that for a minute. And so I'd like to move on to another portion of our meeting tonight. We have candidates for secretary who will be, they each have 2 minutes to introduce themselves. Diana Love will go first. Portia Middleton. Portia, did you make it? Were you able to call in? I don't know. Portia said she was having connectivity issues. So I see that there are a few people joining us by phone. Portia, if you could unmute *9 to let us know if you're here or not. Unfortunately, I don't think she's here. So we have one of the candidates for CDP secretary, Diana Love. Would you please unmute and introduce yourself? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Democrats. I spoke last month, so I'm going to be very brief and just say it's good to see all of you. I talked about my background, being a member of SEIU 2015 and being a part of the Contractor State License Board for Governor Newsom. But what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my background is that I am the vice chair for the California Senior Legislature, and there we submit proposals, we schedule meetings with legislators to carry the proposals as bills. And I've also worked with Congress submitting language that was turned into a bill supporting making changes to the penalties for the Medicare plan for people who did not sign up at age 65. There is a penalty that you pay for life. So there was a bill that was submitted to Congress, and right now it's stalled because we have a Republican in office, but I'm hoping to get Christy Smith back in that seat, and then we will take that bill up again. Another thing I wanted you to know is that I was the president and commissioner for the Los Angeles County Commission for Older Adults, working alongside the Board of Supervisors through the Area Agency on Aging, working on programs that for much needed change for seniors and people that were disabled. And I am currently the COVID-19 community ambassador through the County of Public Health, distributing PPE to seniors and housing facilities and other locations where seniors gather. So I'm much involved and engaged in the things that are seniors. And I'm also engaged in making sure that those seniors who want to continue to work have the opportunity to be employed and are not put in a box because of their age. We all have dignity and pride, and we want to continue to do things. So I am advocating all the time for seniors. So with that, I just want to ask for your support at EBoard. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Thank you.
So Diana, when we sent out the invitation, we asked you to prepare a question for Portia, and we asked Portia to prepare a question for you. What question did you prepare for her, and how would you answer it?
Well, I was going to ask her, had she done any type of legislation on behalf of seniors? And the answer for me to answer was something that I had just said, is that I had prepared legislation that was turned into a bill initially through Congresswoman Katie Hill. And it's HR 1788. And right now it's stalled in Congress. But that was my question to her.
Ah, okay. Thank you very much. So since Portia's not here, we're not opening this part of our meeting to general questions, but I'll see you down at the EBoard, right? You'll be there?
I will be there.
Okay,
And I hope
I'll
to
see
see you and many people that are on this call as well. I look forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Diana.
Thank you so much for inviting me back. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks. And then our next portion of the meeting is for the DNC candidates. And I believe I've seen them all here. And so the three candidates are Rhodesia, Denise, and Michelle. And we'll start with Rhodesia. You have 2 minutes to introduce yourself. So if you could unmute,
Can you all
that
hear
would
me
be
okay?
great. Yeah, hi.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rhodesia Ransom, and I am running to fill the DNC vacancy. I'm very passionate about working in the community and serving the community. I grew up in San Francisco. Doing so, my grandmother was a missionary, and that's how I learned to serve the community. I currently live in the Central Valley. My husband and I moved here 22 years ago. And there's a huge opportunity that's untapped by the DNC, which is the fact that the demographics of the Central Valley have changed. We were very rural and red, and now we are purple and blue. I myself and others have been working here to identify ways to elect Democrats. There are currently seats in Congress that can be held by Democrats because of the demographics, but they're currently being held by Republicans. This is an area where we can win. I've been elected here. Others have been elected here. It takes a lot of work. I'm a collaborative leader, and I think it's important to know that I get things done. I've been on a city council in this red part of the state, and I fought for people who could not fight for themselves, including seniors. I helped push issues such as senior housing, making sure that we got units for seniors who were being pushed out of this community because others were making the housing prices go out of their range. I also fought for a homelessness strategic plan and a shelter and transitional housing. With heavy opposition. It took me 4 years and we finally broke ground on that. And I mention these things because this is what I do is I get involved and I fight for the people who cannot fight for themselves. For the last 20 years, I've also been involved in youth issues. I started a nonprofit that serves vulnerable youth in schools by providing mental health services free of charge in public schools, specifically for kids with executive functioning skills and high mental health needs. And so I'm really looking to be able to move this party forward by taking advantage of the fact that we are the only place in California where there's a pathway to victory, to be able to protect the House, to be able to fight for voters' rights and all of the things that we care about, such as gun violence and just, the things that we care about as Democrats can be won through the Central Valley. So that is a very unique opportunity. Other things that I've done for seniors on the city council was advocated for seniors to get on ramps onto the sidewalks, paratransit, retrofitting of public buildings. And during COVID, I actually was able to get Planned Parenthood to come to our community to bring a COVID testing site because in the Central Valley, we had very little access to COVID testing. For that effort, I was honored alongside Dolores Huerta by Planned Parenthood as an Advocate of the Year last year. I just really want you all to know that I'm serious about this job. I think it's really important that we add a new region and new perspective to the delegation in order to be able to provide new opportunities for all the things that we care about. I'd be honored to have your support, and I'll bring my experience and commitment to the DNC to give California a stronger voice, and I will continue to stand in the gap for seniors and for anyone who really needs it the most, because that's what I've done for my entire life. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we'll have a question for you at the end. So
Yes,
now I'd like to introduce Denise Elamin.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Denise Elamin, and I am a senior, and I'm married to an older senior, and I live in Solvang, California, which is, I believe, the capital of seniors. The majority of people here are seniors. So I have to help seniors daily, and I enjoy it. That's why I moved here. I am seeking the position because I worked for AT&T for 30 years. I was a Communication Workers of America negotiator and a union who fought for all of the employees' rights daily. And I did it for 30 years. So when I came to Solvang and I saw the need here, then I just stepped right into action. I ran for City Council of Solvang in 2018. If you know anything about the Central Valley and Solvang, you know that I am one of one here. There are not many people who look like I do. And I am proud of that. So every day I walk the streets. I walk 2 hours a day in Solvang just to present a person of color who does something against what you believe. So I just want to ask for your vote and to let you know that I'm retired and have been retired for 15 years. I have plenty of time. I will take this job, this vacancy, this appointment seriously. I show up on time. I will stay to the
15 seconds, sorry.
I respect time and I respect guidelines and I respect deadlines. And I just ask for your vote because I would love to have this position. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Denise. And now, Michelle Krug, you can please speak now.
Ruth, I didn't hear what the time limit is.
It's 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. This is a whole new world, virtual world. My name is Michelle Krug. I have been an activist, honestly, since I was 5.5 and on the strike line with my mom, who was a teacher in Brooklyn, New York. She wasn't sending me to school if she was on strike. I have continued that social justice seeking. I moved to San Diego in 1979. I'm a regional director for the California Democratic Party. I'm a lifetime member for the San Diego Central Committee. I have been a voting delegate on the San Diego and Imperial Counties Labor Council since 1981. I have endorsements from the Pro Tem, Tony Atkins, from Dr. Shirley Weber, from Dr. Akila Weber, Lorena Gonzalez, the San Diego and Imperial Counties Labor Council, et cetera, for the California.
Oh no, Michelle, you're breaking up.
Oh, I serve on the county with the persons with disabilities. Is this better, Ruth?
Yes.
Okay. I've been told to turn the telephone upside down and the other way. Anyway, bottom line, I am very involved in my community. I became more involved on the state level about 18 years ago. I'm retired from the city of San Diego. I worked there for 30 years as a wastewater operator.
Oh, Michelle, you're breaking up again. Sorry, we're not.
Ruth, you do have to move on.
Yeah. On the DNC, is it out on the DNC where I am able to know what to do to move the needle forward? We need more resources to the grassroots that is doing the work of changing hearts and minds. And we also need, I'm a blind person. There's never been a physically disabled person on the DNC. We really need to bring that representation. I saw what happened when I was a Bernie delegate, both before COVID and during COVID, where the staff really wanted to help and accommodate, but that conversation doesn't come up on the front end. So I want to be there to bring that up, as well as the other voices that are needed to make that difference. I can't really see what the timing is, so I'm just going to end by saying I really would appreciate your vote. I really think the voices of seniors, disabled, need to have, people that have less abilities need to be there at the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, all of you. We have a question for you. Dr. Bill, could you please read the question?
Sure, thanks, Ruth. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I it's a bit lengthy. I popped it into the chat. It's kind of a statement and a question, but I hope you all can address it perhaps in fewer words than I wrote it in the question. But my question to you is that Democratic Party leadership, both inside the party itself and among our elected holders of public office, are currently taking the blame for our low voter turnout in the primary, both in California and across the country, given the perception that Democrats have failed to come through on promises made regarding issues of critical importance, such as healthcare, education, and housing as a human right, mobilizing resources to deal with our climate emergency, and protecting in law the freedom for all women, and especially women of color, to exercise their free will as regards their personal and private medical decisions. So what will you do, if elected, to move the party forward to realize these expectations for the electorate and in turn motivate voter turnout? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, Rhodesia.
Yes, ma'am. And Dr. Bill, you are right. That was a big question. But to answer your question, people have lost hope. They've lost hope in the Democratic Party. They feel like our leadership is failing and they're not motivated to show up. One of the ways I have motivated to show up is I get things done. I have fought and stood against the status quo and achieved against great opposition. You mentioned women of color. I'm a woman of color in the Central Valley. Being here in the Central Valley, fighting against the status quo, getting elected in a year when Donald Trump was elected in this community, I was able to give people hope. And when opposition, the Republicans on the council were unwilling to deliver on the promises that would move the community forward, I got the community involved. I built a homelessness task force of 87 organizations, and they stormed the city council and they brought in other people, and we got legislation passed. You can read about it in the Tracy Press. I was able to move forward affordable housing. All the not in my backyard people came. So how you get things done is when you collaborate with people. Sometimes you collaborate with unsavory people, but you really have to give people hope in order for them to show up. You have to involve them. I involve the community in everything that I do. I'm a collaborative leader, and I represent people who cannot represent themselves. The best example, the best thing you'll know is there's an old saying is when someone shows you who they are, believe it. I've been showing people who I am for 48 years of life, of living. I grew up with a grandmother who was a missionary. That's what I learned is your word is your bond, and I do what I say I'm gonna do. I involve the community, and we just don't give up hope. And so that is really what this is about. Being in the Central Valley, we have an opportunity to win seats here. This is the only place that you can look. Cara comes in here. Everyone comes and buses people in here because they know that we can win these seats. We need the infrastructure to give more hope because this is a place where seats are purple and blue, but they're being held by Republicans. So that's what I do is I give people hope and I work with people and I get things done. My word is my bond. So that's how I plan to do that.
Thank you, Rhodesia. Denise.
Hello. Hi. I am currently on the DCC Executive Board. I am the chairperson for subcommittee IDEA, which is inclusion, diversion, equity, and accessibility. Our stats here for the midterm in Solvang was 58%. I walked Solvang, the Santa Ynez Valley, daily, talking to people, getting out the vote, asking, what is your problem? Do you vote? What can we do? I did this, and we were the top vote getters in the Central Valley. So I know what works, and I have the time. I know what works. We've proved it. If you look at the stats, you'll see that Solvang, this small little town, we got the people out to vote. So it's all up to us individually. We are all a part of the big Democratic Party, but each one of us have to do our part individually to reach one and get them to vote. And I enjoy talking to people, and I enjoy walking and meeting people, and they never forget. When you talk to people and you talk to them about their personal issues, it's something about they remember you and they are more inclined to vote. So if elected to this position, I promise that I will still walk and talk to get the Democrats to vote, because their issues are important to me. Thank you.
Thank you. And Michelle?
I this is actually falls right in my expertise. San Diego, both the Democratic Party and Labor have had very successful grassroots organizing and labor to neighbor programs. We have hundreds that I think it was actually over 1,000, but I don't want to misquote the numbers, of people who committed to walking their own precinct, plus several others in their neighborhood. So when you give people something that's very doable, something that's convenient, and they're walking their own precinct, they're talking to their own neighbors, their neighbors trust them, because even if they don't know them, they see them walking their dog, they see them cutting their grass, they see them getting milk out of from the 7-Eleven. This makes the difference in solidifying our communities and one-on-one conversations to change those hearts and minds. As I mentioned, I really want to see the DNC investing those resources, not just money, but communication and best practices in the people that actually do that changing of hearts and minds. I'm also excellent at coalition building, because we have had a very strong coalition between Labor and the Democratic Party in terms of doing precinct walking, in terms of getting support for our candidates and our propositions. So basically, talking to people about what's important to them and bringing that together with candidates and our ballot measures. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. Somebody put it in the question in the chat. What is the job of a DNC member? And so we'll start with, let's start with Denise this time.
What is the job of a DC member? Well, I think it is to keep moving forward and not accept the status quo. I hear a lot of people when I'm in the on the EBoard, or when I attend the DNC committee members, I hear a lot of people say it needs to be worse, or and I'm telling them now, that's not good enough. So I'm looking to change people's approach at how we do things, and let's look outside the box. And I'm here to help move us forward. I don't want to look back. I don't care if I've come 50 steps. I want to just move forward. So I think that's what I'm here to do, and I'm fully able and capable of doing it, is moving the DNC forward with some fresh ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, what is the job of being on the DNC to you? Michelle?
Somebody's
okay.
telling me to unmute. Can you hear
Right.
me now?
Yes.
Thank you, whoever sent that button. I see the job as being an amazing opportunity to connect nationwide with best practices, with talking to people, to seeing what has worked in New York, Florida, Tennessee, Kansas, what has not worked, sharing our best practices, bringing it back to California, and sharing what we have done. The DNC is meant to be a connection between all of the 50 states, and to for us to be able to weigh in on policies and on issues and being able to make a difference nationwide, obviously, because we need to do that on the federal level. Just look at the court. But it's also an opportunity for us to learn what we can change in our own communities. So I see it all as intersectional and connected. The councils and the caucuses, similar to what we have in the California Democratic Party, also work in that way, but again, nationwide, where we can see what are we doing, the Poverty Council, what is happening in the West Coast and the East Coast and in the middle. So that's what I see the DNC, and the reason I want to be there is to be able to share that information both directions.
Thank you. Rhodesia.
Yes, thank you. So the job of a DNC member is to help with the platform. The DNC as a collective puts together the platform for the party, and also the strategy to move that platform forward throughout the nation, mostly by electing Democrats to serve in the various regions so that we can protect the House, protect the Senate, and have the Democrats elected that we need to move things forward. That is done by not only participating in caucuses, but representing the different states. The California delegation will represent, through the large collective DNC, really the needs of California. It's going to be working with folks from other states who have different needs than we have. It's also going to be about lifting up those candidates who need our support, identifying those seats that are seats that we can win to give us the balance. So it's a really big job. You're going to need to be out making sure that you're advocating for candidates. Folks have been asking me about my fundraising capabilities. I've raised $500,000 in a year. So it's, you're fundraising, you're lifting up candidates, you're really putting forward the platform, but more importantly, making sure that you are uplifting the party values. We say that we care about gun rights. Well, we need to elect people who will actually move gun rights forward. We need to elect people who will actually stay in the fight for Voting Rights Act. We have to not just put a platform out there and not just replace Democrats with Democrats, but replace Republicans with Democrats and people who will actually do the job. So that is the overall job of a DNC member.
Thank you all so very much for taking your time and being with us today. We appreciate that, and good luck to all of you. I hope I'll see you down there in LA this weekend.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. And so our next portion of our meeting is going to be devoted to what seems to me, that is to me very confusing. It's all about gaming in California. And so the first group that I wanted to call, there are several different propositions on the ballot. And so the first person I'm calling to talk from his point of view or her point of view is Commerce Mayor Oralia Rebollo. Are you one of the people who are calling in, or is Marcus Wolf here?
Ruth, this is Adam Seiden. I'm here from that campaign.
Okay, great.
I was expecting the Commerce Mayor to join, so maybe she didn't make it on. So if she isn't on, I can do that side of it.
That's fine. So you have your 3 minutes right now. Go for it.
Sure. So yeah, there's a few different measures. There's only 2 measures that are actually going to be on the ballot this year, and that you'll actually EBoard members be considering. Prop 26 is the one that I am talking about. Prop 26 is also referred to as the Tribal Sports Wagering Act. I'm here speaking against Prop 26, so no on Prop 26, and asking the Democratic Party to join with AFSCME District Council 36 to oppose Prop 26. The 60 local affiliates of the AFSCME District Council are opposed to Prop 26 because of a poison pill they included, which attacks the card rooms, and in doing so puts 32,000 jobs and $500 million in local tax revenue at risk in those cities where the card rooms operate. Those cities are primarily in communities of color. Now, I know it is difficult to go against something that the Native American tribes are asking for, but it is important to note with this particular measure, there's division within the tribes. There's only about 25% of California's tribes that are even supporting Prop 26. The numbers can be different when we're talking about Prop 27. There's, kind of a number that may, have different opinion on that, but on 26, on supporting Prop 26 is only about 25% of them. And there's a whole other coalition of tribes led by the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians that has a different sports betting measure that they're getting signatures for in 2 years for 2024. And that Native American Coalition's measure does not include this poison pill that is so disastrous to the cities. Again, it's $500 million throughout the state. The reason we were going to have Commerce Mayor join is that one of the cities that's really affected is Commerce. The set of local elected officials came together a few weeks ago to do a press conference about it, and it was in Commerce. It was in front of the senior center. The Commerce has a senior center, and there's a reason why that is a place they choose, because that is a good example of the type of thing that can be lost if these cities lose their funding. For Commerce, we're talking about $28 million, and it's about 40% of Commerce's entire general fund comes from taxes they get from the card room. So it's very significant. And by the way, when you slash city budgets, you're also hurting the union workers who work at those cities. And that's why AFSCME is district council is against that. So I know the Democratic Party usually would support the rights of Native American tribes, be secure in their tribal sovereignty. That is not something I'm speaking against, but that security should not come at the cost of other communities of color and union workers. So we're just asking to please, just remember, it's not like it's all of the tribes that are asking about Prop 26. It's just a certain coalition of them. There's a different coalition talking about a different prop. Just don't hurt union workers, don't hurt communities of color over Prop 26. So please oppose that.
All right, sorry, that was time.
And my thing, that works out well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. And next to speak on a different one of the bills is Nadia. Nadia, is Frank here, or are you going to be doing the presentation?
I will be doing the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, go. It's your turn.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Democrats, for giving me the opportunity. My name is Nadia. I'm here on behalf of the Protect Tribal Sovereignty campaign. And the reason that I am here is to ask you to please help us and vote no on Prop 27. The reason that we're asking you, the state corporations, that they're coming, those are DraftKings and FanDuel, they're coming to our state trying to legalize online sports betting. And if we allow them to do that, they're gonna make us break the promise that we made to the California tribes to give them exclusive gaming rights. We might all remember it was a tough one. So I am asking you to please vote no on Prop 27, because if we do that, it's going to be a direct assault on tribal sovereignty. And I am asking you to help us in stopping that. Don't allow the 10% that they're offering for homeless, which we all know it's a problem. Don't allow them to fool you. 10% is going to become less than that, like it's been proven in other states, that they're coming to 3% to 5%, that what the state is getting. As a matter of fact, 90% of the profits, listen everyone very well, 90% of the profits that these two out-of-state corporations are going to be making, they're gonna go directly to their pockets. They're not even going to hire Californians. So if we leave the things the way they are right now, our California tribes, they will continue hiring Californians. They will continue. We will together can stop these two out-of-state corporations. To finalize, When we had the pandemic, unfortunately, I was almost losing my little restaurant, but a big corporation came right in front of my restaurant, me with 8 tables. That big corporation came with 20. It's exactly the same thing that these 2 corporations are going to do. So when you vote, don't forget my little restaurant where my older son, my husband, and my mother and myself used to work together in there. We couldn't compete with those big corporations. Thank you so much for allowing me to finalize that 95% of the tribes are against. Never forget my little restaurant, which was called Mama Lichas after my mother. Thank you so much, and you guys have a wonderful rest of the evening.
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you very much. I understand that Jenny Bach wanted to make a presentation about one of these gaming propositions also. Jenny, are you here?
Hi, yes. Good evening, fellow Democrats. My name is Jenny Bach, and I'm here tonight to share a bit more about Yes on the Prop 27 ballot measure, Solutions to Homelessness and Mental Health Support Initiative. So Prop 27 will be the only measure on the 2022 ballot that will guarantee hundreds of millions of dollars each year to fight homelessness and fund mental health treatment in California by taxing online sports betting. California is the 5th largest economy in the world, yet it's the state with the most unhoused individuals. 160,000 unhoused neighbors live in California, including older adults over 50 who account for half of unhoused adults. So this number is only growing. With California's voter support, Prop 27 will create permanent funding for the first time. 85% of the funding will go toward homelessness and much needed mental health support and addiction treatment. 15% will go toward tribes, including smaller tribal communities who work day in and day out to build back their economy to support generations to come. This measure is endorsed by several Democratic mayors, including mayors of Long Beach, Fresno, Oakland, Sacramento, housing advocates, and chairman of the Big Valley Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians and Middleton Rancheria of Pomo Indians, because they believe that voting yes on Prop 27 will move their communities and our state forward. Please join us in voting yes on Prop 27. We'll also be hosting a workshop this Friday at EBoard at 3 o'clock with our tribal leaders and their families, and we welcome any and all questions. We do understand that a lot of these initiatives are extremely confusing. Thanks for the opportunity and the space and time tonight. Thanks, Ruth.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you. And last but not least, we have Patty Hughes, who will be speaking and sharing a video as well. So Patty, you have the floor. Patty?
There we go. I'm unmuted now, and I'll be
Yes.
sharing
Yes.
the video first, and then quite a bit of information in the chat, dispelling some of the myths, clarifying some information for all of you, inviting you to our hospitality suite on Saturday evening at the EBoard, and sharing a press release from Dolores Huerta, who is in support of our measure 26 and opposed to Proposition 27. Okay, here we go.
For more than 2 decades, California Democrats have stood with Indian tribes as we fought to establish and protect gaming on our tribal lands.
As tribal leaders who have firsthand seen the transformative benefits that tribal gaming has had for our people, we want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Gaming has helped lift our tribes out of poverty, providing funding for housing, infrastructure, schools, and other vital services. In return, Indian tribes continue to uphold our commitment to operate safe, responsible gaming.
Tribal gaming creates thousands of good-paying jobs and generates billions in revenue and economic opportunities for local communities and the state.
This year, there may be multiple measures on the November ballot related to sports wagering. Each would greatly impact our tribes and all of California.
We are respectfully asking delegates of the California Democratic Party to once again stand with California Indian tribes by opposing the corporate online gambling proposition and supporting the in-person Tribal Sports Wagering Act.
The corporate online gambling proposition is sponsored by out-of-state and foreign gambling corporations. It would legalize online sports gambling across California, turning virtually every phone, tablet, and laptop into a gambling device.
The measure has no meaningful controls to prevent underage gambling or problem gambling.
This measure would give the out-of-state gambling corporations near total control of the sports wagering market in California, jeopardizing our sovereignty and tribal gaming operations.
It sends the vast majority of revenues out of the state and to foreign countries, while at the same time putting thousands of jobs in California at risk. Proponents are selling this deceptive measure as a solution to homelessness, but by trying to address homelessness through a massive expansion of online gaming is just bad policy.
On the other hand, the Tribal Sports Wagering Act would authorize a more responsible approach by allowing sports wagering in person at California's highly regulated tribal casinos.
This measure will create new sources of revenue, jobs, and opportunities for tribal and non-tribal communities alike, while providing additional resources for non-gaming tribes.
Our broad coalition of Indian tribes, social justice advocates, and community organizations is overwhelmingly united in opposition to the corporate online gambling proposition and in support of the in-person Tribal Sports Wagering Act.
We ask members of the California Democratic Party, please stand with California Indian tribes.
Please stand with California Indian tribes.
Please stand with California Indian tribes.
Please stand with California Indian tribes. Thank you.
Fellow Democrats, please stand with California Indian tribes. And I will be putting that information, very important information, into the chat for you to read. This will help you in clarity with regard to these other measures. Thank you again for the opportunity, Chair Carter.
Thank you, Patty. There is one more. This one is not about gaming or gambling. This one is about clean air. It's called the Clean Air Initiative. And I'd like to invite Joe Armenta to unmute, and you have 3 minutes for your presentation.
Yes, hello. Hi, Ruth, and hello, California Democrats. My name is Joe Armenta. You may know me from other shenanigans I've done in the last 2 years with the state party, but here today, I'm here to talk about Prop 30, which is going to be on the ballot this year, and that's the Clean Air California Initiative. And what this initiative does is really addressing one of the biggest issues that we all face as Californians, and that's the impact of climate change on our communities. I don't have to tell you all about the devastating impact that we're having. You see the wildfires. There's a prolonged drought, especially in Southern California, going on. And really a main culprit for this is vehicle emissions, the way we're polluting the air through our cars. And so what this initiative is doing is it's trying to speed up the transition away from fossil fueled power vehicles and invest in zero emission vehicles. So both electric cars and hydrogen powered cars that offer no emissions and also clean up the air that we breathe. How this initiative does it is it raises up to $5 billion per year over the next 20 years. And it invests the money into 3 different things. One is subsidizing the cost of zero emission vehicles. So they're very expensive right now. And so a big chunk of the money would go to subsidizing and lowering the cost of vehicles. Another is supporting the infrastructure like electric charging stations and hydrogen power or hydrogen storage stations. The electric cars don't really work if you don't have anything to plug it into. And so a big chunk of the money is going to increasing that infrastructure across the state in every community. And then additionally, another portion of the fund goes to wildfire prevention. So solving the climate or mitigating the climate crisis right now that we're facing. Basically, we went to the firefighters union and asked them what they needed, and they provided a language in the initiative and designed it around that. The initiative funds this by putting a 1.75% tax on income over $2 million. So it is a millionaire's tax. It is a progressive revenue tax, and the money is going to zero emission vehicles and wildfire prevention. We're being supported by unions like IBEW and the state firefighters. We also have environmental groups. This is really an environmental-led initiative. So California Environmental Voters and the Natural Resources Defense Council are all supporting this. And additionally, public health groups like the American Lung Association, because this does clean up pollution in our communities as well. A big chunk of air pollution comes from our vehicles, and it's very damaging for communities, especially communities of color. I should also mention too that 50% of the funds for this will go to low income communities as well. So it's lowering that cost for electric vehicles and making sure that they are accessible to all Californians. So with that, I'm happy to drop more information in the chat, answer a question, or I can just turn it back to you, Ruth.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much. And I know all of us have to do a lot of work right now to study up all of these initiatives and propositions. I think they just got numbers, and so we have a lot of work to do as voters. And so thank you all for being here. And we have some caucus business to do with a bylaw change. And so I'm going to turn the floor over to Ralph Miller. Ralph, would you please unmute and take the floor?
Thank you, Ruth. Actually, you have me down for two things. So one of them, just real quickly, we need some help with our communications officer. We are currently operating without one. I have up here the function definition from our bylaws. So if you're interested in helping us on the communications front, please send us an email, reach Ruth, myself, or any of the other officers. And we'd love to have your help. So that's just a call for help. The other is the bylaws relating to special meetings, and it's a change necessitated by some recent needs to communicate to the group and to have a meeting ahead of some endorsements. We realized that there was no provision within the bylaws as it existed to have a special meeting. About a month ago, we did have a membership meeting to have a first reading of this and get input. We have made these changes based on our original assessment, as well as from the listening meeting that we had a month ago, specifically to reduce the amount of time required for a special meeting to be called to 5 days before the special meeting, or at least 5 days. Again, it's something that would be used very sparingly for specific purposes, as we've seen with the endorsement vote. Our purpose here today is not to discuss it, but rather to vote on it because it's been distributed to the membership. So at this point, I'd like to direct you to the reactions button on your screen and ask you to vote yes or no. We will keep Howard, are you still on? I saw Howard had gone in and out. Howard Eggerman, our secretary, will tally the yes, no.
I am here. Yes. Okay, so let me see how
excellent.
we're doing this.
So Howard will tally the yes and no votes. What I would suggest is that we do the yes votes first, and then have everybody put their hands down, and then do the no votes. So
and let me just add to that: the yes is a green circle with a white check in it.
Correct.
We'll count that. If you can't access it, you want to give us a thumbs up, we'll count that too.
There you go.
Can I just ask that it actually get read? Is it that long? But I can't see what's actually being voted on.
Yeah, it is rather long, but
summarize it.
The changes are that special meetings of the membership may be called by the caucus executive board at such dates and times and for such purposes as it deems necessary. The other provision is that notice will be given at least 5 days. A regular meeting requires 20 days, but a special meeting would require 5 days before the scheduled meeting, or 3 days if by postal mail.
Okay, thank you.
That's the brunt of it.
Thanks.
Okay. So Howard, are you ready? I'll wait for Howard to respond. Howard. I'm assuming that Howard can see this. So for everybody who supports the proposed changes, if you could note that a yes or a thumbs up, we'll go ahead and count those. I'm gonna take this down so that we can count.
Okay, I only see 5. I don't know if that's right or not.
No, okay, I'm going to count them 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay,
If you count them, let me know, because I only see 5 green check marks.
We have 24 right
Okay,
now.
24 yes. Okay. I have an old Zoom.
Okay, I have 24 yeses. And if everybody,
how many no's?
If everybody could put their hands down, and then once everybody's reactions are down, please take your reactions down. Okay, now the no votes, if you could vote no, that's the red X, or
it's red X. Okay.
Red X.
Okay, because I don't see any red X's.
I'm looking down the list. There are 0. There's Angelica. Are you voting against the bylaws change? I see 1 X. It is
Angelica, are you voting against the bylaws change? You are, okay.
No, and I
guess she
don't
is.
know.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Okay, so we see
Okay,
no
so
red X's.
No, I
So
want to.
0
Okay, so
against
we had-
24. And I
Okay,
don't know
so
how we do abstentions.
25
but
yes, 0 no.
0 no, and the rest
So it's
are
more than
abstentions. Or not.
2/3. So I'm going back to my sergeant at arms duties for my union. So the bylaw amendment is passed, Mr. Emeritus and Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for a very interesting and informative meeting. Thank you all for being here. I hope I'll see some of you down in LA at the EBoard meeting. We just so that you know, here's an update. We have been told that our request for the California Democratic Party to support, give full-throated support and bring to a vote SJR 11 and HR 5723, that those that will be on the consent calendar. And I've also been told that HR 5723 will be brought to the floor of the Congress next week when they come back. So this is all good news. So see you this weekend, I hope. Otherwise, I'll see you at our next meeting. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.